the doctor who never clocked out. Paramedics are incredibly superstitious. That's not something I fully appreciated until I became one myself. Before that, I thought it was all about rationality, staying calm in a crisis, and following the science. It seemed almost absurd to me that people who held lives in their hands could believe in things like ghosts or bad luck. But then, I got my EMT certification, and everything changed. Growing up, my parents worked as paramedics, and our household was steeped in EMS folklore. They'd tell me never to say the Q word on shift or expect to sleep during an overnight. They'd laugh about how dining in at a restaurant was a sure way to get a call before your food arrived. These weren't just stories, they were rules. Unwritten, but ironclad, and the little white coffin stories. Those were a whole other category. Each one was a grim reminder to take care of myself and avoid reckless behavior. As a kid, they scared me into caution. As an adult, they stuck with me, making me hyper-aware of the fragility of life. But nothing prepared me for the night I met the doctor. It was my first overnight shift at a rural EMS post along abandoned hospital building tucked deep in the woods of North Jersey. The place had been repurposed into quarters for paramedics, a cost-effective solution for covering the remote areas nearby. It was eerie, to say the least. The hospital had been mostly left to decay, with only a small section renovated for our use. The rest of the building loomed in silence, dark and untouched. That night, my partner and I arrived for our shift and settled into the quarters. The space was modest. A few bunks, a kitchenette, and a bathroom. The air was heavy with the smell of age and mildew, and every creak of the old floors seemed amplified in the stillness. As the night dragged on, the quiet settled over us like a blanket, lulling my partner into a deep sleep. I tried to join them, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. It was my first real overnight shift, and I felt an odd mix of excitement and unease. Around 2 a.m., I gave up on sleep and decided to freshen up in the bathroom. The hot water from the tap was a small comfort, and I found myself scrubbing my hands and arms obsessively, trying to wash away the grime of the day's calls. The mirror fogged up as steam filled the small space, creating a cocoon of warmth. I turned the tap off, dried my hands, and reached for the door, but something made me glance back at the mirror. That's when I saw it. A figure stood behind me, its form hazy in the condensation. My heart jumped into my throat. Spinning around, I found nothing. The bathroom was empty. I told myself it was just my imagination, a trick of the light. But the hair on the back of my neck stood on end as I hurried back to the bunk. I was halfway to my bed when I heard it. The unmistakable sound of running water. I froze. I knew I had turned the tap off. I was sure of it. Swallowing hard, I turned back to the bathroom. The sink was on full blast, steam billowing into the air. My hands shook as I shut it off again, twisting the handle tight. This time, I lingered for a moment, staring at the faucet as if daring it to move. Nothing happened. I exhaled, feeling a bit foolish, and went back to bed. But sleep wouldn't come. Every creak and groan of the old building seemed magnified, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Hours passed before I finally drifted off, only to be jolted awake by a voice.
"Hey, come on, up."
It was a deep, gruff voice, right in my ear. My eyes flew open, and I sat bolt upright, expecting to see my partner or another crew member standing over me. But the room was empty. My partner was still snoring softly in their bunk, and the only sound was the faint hum of the space heater. Then the radio chirped, its volume barely audible.
52!
The dispatcher called. My heart raced as I grabbed the radio and responded. 52 here. We had a call. As we loaded into the ambulance and sped off into the night, I couldn't stop thinking about the voice. It had sounded nothing like the dispatcher. It wasn't anyone I recognized, and it certainly wasn't my imagination. I'd never been more awake in my life. Days later, during a casual conversation with some security guards who used to patrol the hospital, I mentioned the strange events of that night. One of them laughed nervously. "Oh, that's just the doctor," he said. "The doctor?" I asked, confused. He explained that the hospital had once been staffed by a dedicated physician who'd lived on site, working tirelessly to care for the miners and locals. The doctor had passed away in the building, but stories of his presence persisted. Guards and paramedics alike had reported seeing his flashlight roaming the halls or hearing his voice late at night. He was a helper, they said, still watching over the place and the people in it. I didn't know what to make of it. I still don't. But I'll tell you this, I've never ignored a strange feeling or a gut instinct since that night. Whether it's superstition or something more, I've learned to trust the unseen. After all, paramedics are incredibly superstitious, and now, so am I. Follow, share, and like for more stories.